I don't think there is any country in the world that has such an amazing variety of cuisines.
It's a balagan, it's a mishmash, it's a combination of dishes from the 70 different ethnicities that came over to Palestine. It's a lovely meeting point of the old world and the new world.
Today, I have to say, you will not find one good restaurant in Israel that doesn't serve local Middle Eastern, Mediterranean, Arabic, New Israeli, Old Jewish, whatever you want to call it, food.
This place, Miznon, Eyal Shani is like the top chef in Israel, one of the forefathers of modern Israeli cooking. Used to be well known for doing European and sort of fancy, really got into his roots and is now doing sort of celebration of Israeli street food. For example, ridiculously fresh, delicious pita stuffed with corned beef. This is a yam cooked for 4 hours at a very low temperature. It's all super fresh, a little bit of olive oil, a little bit of rock salt. This isn't old school, this isn't grandmother, this is vibrant, good cooking. You can keep your truffles and foie gras. This is where it's at.
This is the kubrana.
The Yemenite Sabbath bread.
Yeah, exactly. You eat it in Shabbat morning with eggs and with a tomato. What is amazing in Israel, I think, is the only country in the world that so many cuisines came here together. And what we are trying to do here is to take the traditional Jewish dishes and like play with them, even make fun on them.
It's funny because like people think of Israeli cuisine and immediately they're like falafel, shawarma.
Falafel or shawarma.
Or they're like Jewish food. It's like deli food too, right? So we're sitting in Israel right now and we're having an aioli that has got dashi in it. And we're having herring done in sort of a very typical way that dates back to 16th century Holland.
And then you have the intermarriage, the cross-pollination, so to speak, of all the countries. Only in Israel you're going to find a Moroccan Jew marrying a Polish Jew, or a Russian marrying a Hungarian, or an American married an Iraqi. Do they serve gefilte fish or do they serve chraime?
Then, of course, we are all in the Middle East, so we have a lot of Middle Eastern influences.
How long have you had a spice shop?
400 years.
So all these people who came to Israel when it was just founded, they came from different places from all over the world, and they brought with them, among other things, the wonderful cuisine of those places.
Thank you. Mr. Ivan Djokovic, Ms. Tanya Meshevich, Robert. I think that what you saw in the video provokes one question. Is there any Israeli cuisine? And if there is an Israeli cuisine, what it is? Now, for Israelis, this is an obsessive question. Why is it an obsessive question? Because as you saw in the video, it's part of our identity. The cuisine is what we are. The cuisine is our culture. The cuisine is our history. The cuisine is ourselves. So for us, giving an answer to the question, what is an Israeli cuisine, is giving an answer to the question, who are we? So this is why it became almost a political question. For sure, it's a sociological question, not social, but even sociological question. Now, there are those who would say there is no Israeli cuisine. As we saw, Israeli cuisine at the end is a kind of mixture of traditions of where the Jews came from and where they took the food from the countries they came from. There would others that say that Israeli took Mediterranean food that is not Israeli one. And one would say that the state of Israel, who is 70 years old, is not enough to create a tradition of Israeli cuisine. On the contrary, there are those who would say, yes, there is an Israeli cuisine, which is indeed a kind of mixture, but it's not only a mixture of cuisines that came from other places, but has been, as you said, we are playing with it, we are having fun with it, there is a lot of twists to this local tradition. So these are the main answer. And then they say, okay, but every national cuisine is influenced by others. I mean, we talk about hamburgers and hot dogs. Of course, they came from Germany, but they are the national food of the American food, and so on and so forth. So at the end, this is a kind of mutual influence of cuisines. What we can say is that there are several Israeli characteristics to the Israeli cuisine that are a kind of result of all those things. So first of all, indeed, the basic is the traditional food that each family brought with it. So we have in Israel North African food, we have European, American, we have Iraqi cuisine, Yemenite cuisine, Persian, Iran, today also Ethiopian cuisine, and everything is considered Israeli cuisine. There is also Balkan cuisine. In our culture, we have the burek, we have the halva, we have the baklawa, with everything. Also because there were Jews who came from Turkey, and we were also under the Ottoman Empire for many years. So there are lots of similarities also between the Balkan cuisine and the Israeli cuisine. So this is one influence. The other influence is the Mediterranean cuisine. And this is for three reasons. First of all, because we are in the Mediterranean. We are very influenced by our neighbors. Secondly, a significant part of the Israeli society came from these countries, especially from North Africa, but not necessarily. And thirdly, what we are growing in Israel is under the same climate and same conditions as our region. So it's the same ingredients, the same weather, the same culture. So this is why the Mediterranean cuisine has influenced us a lot. Secondly, as I said, what we brought from abroad has passed in Israel a kind of twist. We played with the food. We made all kinds of very strange combinations of taking the schnitzel from Austria with hummus sauce from the Mediterranean, something that looks very strange for others, but for us it's the everyday food. So we make all kinds of these combinations. Some of them are a bit rare, and we also give twist to the food. And why we give twist to the food? Because you can imagine that what has been shaped in Russia has nothing to do with Israel, because they brought the food, but then they didn't find the ingredients in Israel. So they had to adapt the traditional food to the ingredients that exist in the Middle East. And here in the Middle East, they found things that they didn't have in Russia, like fruit and vegetables. So they added the fruit and vegetable to the traditional food. So there is all kind of mixture. And there are also some food that is only consumed in Israel. I will give you an example, something that is called ptitim. I mentioned it because in the 50s, when Israel was a very poor country, it had no production. Practically, we had 600,000 Israelis when Israel was born, and in the first decade, we have more than 1 million refugees coming to Israel. So there was practically no food. So the prime minister has asked the only producer in Israel to produce something that would substitute rice, because there was no rice in Israel. And they invented something that looks like rice, but it's made of wheat. It is called ptitim. I mentioned it because everyone in Israel grew up with this ptitim that was something really very popular for the poor population of Israel. But as usually, it has been rebranded, especially by American chefs, taken to New York. So if you see New York and you are going to New York, something that is called Israeli couscous, it's not Israeli couscous. This is a rebranding of something really popular from the 50s when we really didn't have nothing. Now it's up to you to taste it. So this is also a kind of rebranding or upgrading things that we take also from somewhere else. The most popular cheese in Israel is the cottage cheese, but it has been changed. It's not the American cottage cheese that you know, it's something else, but it's based on that. In addition to it, I would mention also there is some kind of culture. We have this culture of huge breakfast, something that is different than in other countries, and is especially characteristic by salad, Israeli salad, which is as every other child salad, but chopped very, very in small pieces. You have to work very hard in order to get these results. Taking into account two other things. One thing is that in Israel we have 20% of the society who is not Jewish. So we have lots of influence coming from the Muslims and from the Christians. Because we have an important population, especially of Muslims in Israel. And secondly, we have what we call kosher food, which is the Jewish restrictions. I would not enter into it, but I would say that there are several levels of restrictions for Jews, for observers of Judaism, that is called kosher, and it has a lot of impact on, of course, on our food and our culture, So I would say that the food portrays our society, and this is why it is so important for us to maintain the tradition of food, but to add also something new, because we believe in what we call the tradition of innovation. And I think that when we talk about tradition of innovation, which is the slogan, by the way, of our 70th anniversary, when we talk about tradition of innovation, it's taking what we know, the traditional thing, make a twist, and making something new out of it. And this is exactly what we are doing with our food. So it's really characteristics to our society, to our mentality, to our way of thinking. I would mention, if we talk about traditions and innovation, I would mention also that Israel has quite innovative agro-technology that maybe developed several things that do not, I mean, today they exist all over the world, but they were invented in Israel, like the cherry tomatoes. And now apparently I found out there is even an upgraded cherry tomato, even smaller, like blueberry. So this is something that has been invented in Israel. And again, what we are doing in this sense is sometimes we are taking old varieties that existed even in biblical times, 2,000, 3,000, 4,000 years ago, and we are trying to renovate and reintroduce them in the place where they belong to, with the same climate, the same soil, but with new technology. So we are now in this, and this influences a lot our wine industry. I will mention it in a moment, but just for a second, some details about our food industry in Israel. We have 1,800 facilities of food processing in the food processing sector in Israel. We have more than 130 beverage plants in Israel, and the annual revenue of the food and beverage in Israel is $16 billion. These are numbers of 2016, which is 18% of the total manufacturing industries in general. Let me say something about wine industry in Israel. Wine industry has been started in Israel much before the creation of the State of Israel in the end of 19th century, beginning of the 20th century, since the main supporter of the Zionist movement and the idea of the Jews moving from their countries to their land, to their homeland Israel, was the Rothschild family, and Rothschild family is the owner of Chateau Lafite in France, and what they could do in order to encourage the Jews who came to Israel and to develop and to work the soil was the idea of bringing wine. So they were the first to develop it. And we have in Israel a kind of a mixture of classic varieties of grapes and some rare varieties of grapes. You have all the data here. We would finish with a very short, or the second part of this video.
We're going to make some traditional Turkish food, stuff from my grandmother's house.
So I feel like what's so exciting about Israeli cuisine right now is that you've got this huge melting pot of immigrants and such amazing ingredients and agricultural innovation. I think it makes sense of all of it.
When you have a culture that is 1,000 years old, then it's difficult to change it.
Yeah.
For example, Jewish food will be very difficult to change. When you talk about how your seder table looks like, every time you change the seasoning of the chicken or the knedler, then everyone is like,
God forbid you should have not traditional chocolate.
Israeli culture is very young. And it allows you to maneuver and change things. We're more flexible. I think it helped the Israelis really incorporate traditional and authentic food.
Then you have the local ingredients, which are amazing. It's unbelievable the progress that has been going on for the last 3.5 decades in wine, olive oil, and in food in general. It's one of the biggest revolutions I've ever seen.
And when you come to a place like this and you feel the land, you become a part of the chain of tradition, the chain of ancestors that did this before us. Abraham was a nomad who was herding his goats right here.
In 50 years, what are people going to be calling Israeli cuisine now? The adaptation and the transformation of it once it gets here is what is the most important. It's always moving forward, always the future. What's going to happen next? To be able to do that and couple it with thousands of years of tradition is what's so exciting.
So I would like to finish with one slide that I love. I really love it because everywhere I go in the last 2 years that I'm here, everybody mentioned the similarity between Serbia and Israel. And we always talk about our shared history, but we didn't talk about our shared smoky. Because when 2 days ago, when I thought about what to prepare for this lecture, I asked Daniela, look, I found something that really was invented in Israel and nobody knows about it, and it is called bamba. And I showed it to her and she said, I think we have it as well. So the first thing I did is went to Maxi and buy one smoky, and I can tell you it's really the same, or quite the same. So this is, I think, an expression of similarity and solidarity between Serbia and Israel. I wish you really success in New York. You really deserve it. You have wonderful food and wonderful, innovative food. And I really enjoyed it. So thank you very much.